Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my object-oriented programming in JavaScript crash course. In this video, we're going to look at some of the basics and core concepts of writing code in an object-oriented fashion in JavaScript. And this content is very closely related to my Modern JavaScript from the Beginning course on Udemy. So if you haven't checked that out, I'll put the link in the description. If you have, then some of this might look familiar to you. It's not the same code, but we're looking at some of the same concepts. So in this video, we're going to look at a lot of different things. We're going to look at object literals, which if you've used JavaScript for any amount of time, you probably have used. We're also going to talk a little bit about what an object is. Then we're going to move on to ES5 constructor functions and prototypes. Okay, we'll also talk a little bit about inheritance. I'll talk about the Object.create method, and we're also going to look at ES6 classes. Now, it's important to know that when you use ES6 classes, these are basically, it's called syntactic sugar or a convenience syntax. And the reason for that is because you're writing it in a different way using classes, which relates more to other languages like Java, C#, PHP, and so on. But under the hood, it's still using those prototypes. It's still using that ES5 syntax, and I'll show you that in the browser tools. Now, when it comes to objects in JavaScript, basically. And this isn't real code I'm going to type. I'm going to delete this after. But basically, we have an object, and we can do dot, and we can either call a property on it. So if it has a property associated with it, or if it has a function associated with it, it's actually called a method. Okay, so we can either have a property like a string or an array or an object literal, something like that, or it can be a function that actually executes. Now, there are languages where you hear everything is an object, such as Ruby. In JavaScript, it's a little weird because almost everything is an object. You have a couple data types like strings, numbers, booleans. These are actually primitives, but you can use methods on a string. Okay, so if I were to say const s, so const string equals hello, I can actually do like console.log, and I can take that string and I can do .to, we'll do to uppercase, which is a method. Okay, so basically it seems like it's an object with a method. If I save that, we get hello in all uppercase. So basically, this is a primitive. It's not an object, but once we call a method on it like this, JavaScript behind the scenes adds a wrapper to it, and you can actually create strings as objects. So you can do like const s equals new string, like that. Okay, and I'm just going to show you a different. Let me call this something else. I'll call this S2 and this S1, and let's do S1 right here. All right, now let's take a look at the types of these two. Okay, I can actually get rid of this. So let's do console.log, and let's say type of. So this is an operator that will actually give us the type of what's in this variable. And if I save that, we get string. If I do the same thing down here for S2, oops, not 12, 2, we get object. Okay, so basically when we use a method like to uppercase or something, it's doing this behind the scenes. Okay, but by default this is a primitive. It's not an actual object. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. It's really hard to explain actually. And then we also have, and I'm going to leave this, but I'll comment it out. We also have like DOM objects such as the window. So if I say console.log window, that's actually the parent object of everything. And if we look at this inside our console, you'll see it has a bunch of methods. One of these being alert, which is really popular. It just basically gives us like a pop-up. So we can take that window object and we can call the alert method. Okay, and I didn't put anything in there, but we could put something in here. So let's put like a 1, and it will alert us with a 1. Now, since window is the absolute parent object, there's basically in the DOM, in the browser, there's nothing above window. So anything with window, you don't have to actually do window dot. We could simply do alert 1. Okay, we also have inside window. We have a ton of stuff here, but just to give you another example, we have the navigator, which is like kind of like the browser, like your system. For instance, we could do, let's see, let's comment this out and this out, and we could say console.log. And since navigator is actually part of the window object, we don't have to do window.navigator, even though that would work. But let's do navigator. You can see with VS Code, we actually have a drop down of the available methods and properties. But let's do app version, which is a property. So we'll save that, and you can see it's going to give you basically some info on my system, what OS I'm using, what browser I'm using. It's a little weird because it says Chrome, which is what I'm using, but it also says Safari. So this is kind of weird how it's formatted. But just to show you that we can call methods. So window.alert is a property with a method, and then navigator.appVersion is a object with a property. Okay, so I know that if you're just getting into JavaScript, that may be a little difficult to understand, but I did want to just bring it up. So now we're going to get into object literals, which is actually easier to talk about than this stuff. So let's create a book that is an object literal. We're going to work with books in this throughout this course here. So let's call it book 1, and let's create it by adding just some curly braces. So this is an object literal. And in here we can have properties, which are just key value pairs. So we're going to say title. Let's say book 1. And let's do author. And we'll say John Doe. And let's do year, and we'll say 2013. Okay, so now we can go down here and we can console.log, and if I just log book 1 and save, you'll see that we actually have an object here with some fields. Okay, same thing that you can see here. Now if we want to call an individual property, like let's say title, then we can take that object and we can call that property, so .title. All right, so we get book 1. And I know a lot of you guys probably know this stuff. You probably want to get into the constructor and prototypes and all that. But just for the people that don't really, the people that are really new to JavaScript, I just want to kind of explain this stuff. Now, in this book 1, we can also put in a function as a property. So let's say we want to do get summary. We can actually set that to a function. And what I want this to do is basically return a string that's going to say like book 1 was written by John Doe in 2013. So what I'm going to do is return, and I'm going to use a template literal here. So I'm going to use backticks instead of single quotes or double quotes, so I don't have to do all kinds of concatenation. This is part of ES6, by the way. And then we're going to put in a variable of this.title. Now this is referring to this specific object. So we can get the title of this object by saying this.title. So we're going to say this.title was written by, and then I want the author. So I'm going to use this syntax again and say this.author in, and then I want the year. So I'm going to say this.year. Okay, so now we have a method or a function attached to this object. So I could say book1.getSummary and save it, and we get book 1 was written by John Doe in 2013. Okay, so this is an object literal. Let me just put a comment here. Now, what if we want to create more than one book? I mean, we could take this and we could go down here and we could say book 2, change this to book 2, we'll change it to Jane Doe as the author, and we'll say 2016. Okay, and we'll have the get summary in there as well, and then we could do book 2.get summary and save, and we get book 2 was written by Jane Doe in 2016. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you is if you actually want to see all the values of an object, we could do console.log, and we could actually do object.values, and we can pass in, let's say, book 2 and save, and that will actually give us an array of the values inside. We can also get the keys. Actually, I'll keep this. I'll just copy this down, and we can say object dot keys of book 2, and that'll give us the keys, which is title, author, year, and get summary. Okay, so just wanted to show you guys that as well. Now, if we wanted to keep creating books, or even if we wanted to create 2 books like this, it's kind of a pain because we have to create 2 object literals. We have to create get summary twice. We have to create the same function twice. So this is where constructors come in. Okay, so we're going to move on to constructors. I'm going to save this and go to 2_constructor.js and just change that in my index.html. So 2_constructor.js. All right, so with a constructor, it's basically just a function. So let's say constructor, and this is ES5, by the way. We're not working with classes or anything yet. So let's say function book, okay, and you want to give it an uppercase B. So function book, and right now I'm just going to console.log, and I'm just going to say book initialized, or instantiated, I guess would be a better term, but it's fine. So we have this constructor, and now we can actually create books from this constructor. So we can say const book1 equals new book. Now if I save that, you'll see book initialized, and the reason that this ran is because when you instantiate, actually I'll just put that in here, instantiate an object. So when you instantiate an object from the constructor, it's going to run whatever is in here. And all I have in here is a console log. Now, if I were to create another book, so let's say book 2, book 2, and save, you'll see this is going to run twice because we initialized or instantiated 2 book objects. Now, this code is pretty useless because all we're doing is logging this. So what I'm going to do is pass in to our constructor a title, an author, and a year. Okay, just like we did with the literal. And we just want to we want to take this dot title, which is it's going to refer to whatever instance we're using. And we want to set that to the title that's passed in. Okay, and we want to do that same thing with all of these. So this one, let's do author. So author, and then this will be year. So now what's happening is when we instantiate a book, we want to pass in these 3 things. So let's go down here and let's say book 1, and the author is John Doe. And what else did I have? The year, so we'll say 2013. Bear with me, guys, I'm doing this like off the top of my head. So, and then we'll have book 2. We'll say Jane Doe, and the year will be, let's say, 2016. All right, so now I save this. We're not going to see anything here because this is getting executed, but all it's doing is assigning properties. Now, if I wanted to get, let's say, the title of book 1, I could say console.log book1.title. Okay, just like I could with the object literal. But now we can create as many books as we want with this constructor. All right, if we want to look at just the book 1 itself, you can see that we get the same thing as we did with the literal, except it's now prefixed by the actual type of object it is, which is a book. All right, and you see, also notice this proto object. This is like kind of like a pseudo object, and this will show us anything that's in the prototype. Now, we don't have any specific prototype methods for the book object, but there is an object.prototype, and that's what you're looking at here. And this actually has a bunch of its own methods. All right, I'm not really going to get into object.prototype and stuff, but it is there, and it does. Every object is going to inherit that. So let's create. Remember that get summary we had in the literals here. So we have 2 object literals. We had to repeat get summary. What we could do is we could put this as a property. So we could say this get summary in our constructor and set that to a function. And what I'll do is just copy the return value here and paste that in. And now we can call this get summary with any, even if we had 100 books here, we could just do book1.get summary and save, and we get book 1 was written by John Doe in 2013. We can do book 2. Okay, and if we had 1,000 books, we could still call get summary, and it's only defined once, rather than defining 1,000 object literals with 1,000 get summaries. All right, now if we look at book 2, just book 2 in our console, you'll see it has the basic properties we added at first, but it also has get summary as a function. Now, this is a good example of where we should use a prototype method instead of putting it right in the constructor. So now we're going to move on to prototypes, but I just want to copy, actually we'll copy the whole thing. So I'm going to copy this and go to prototypes, and we're going to have our constructor, and instead of putting get summary right inside the constructor, let's create a prototype method. So we'll say get summary. And what we can do is just say book. So we're going to take the object name or the constructor function name, whatever you want to call it, and we're going to call prototype dot get summary. And we're going to set that equal to a function. And I'm just going to grab the return, paste that in, and we're going to completely get rid of this from the constructor. Okay, now we should still be able to do book2 dot get summary and save. Wait a minute. Why is it giving? Oh, I didn't change the JavaScript file. It should now be 3_prototypes. Okay, so now you can see in the console we're getting book 2 is written by Jane Doe in 2016. So it still works, and if we actually look at book 2 now, it has just the title, author, and year. You don't see the get summary in the actual object. But if we look at proto, there it is. Okay, so it's now stored in the prototype rather than in the object itself. And the reason we want to do this is because we do want a title, author, and year for every book, but we're not going to want get summary for every book. So that's why we want to store it in the prototype. Okay, and if we do another one, let's put another prototype here. I'm just going to call this get age, which is kind of weird, but what it's going to do is just give us the number of years that have passed since the book was created. So let's say book.prototype.getAge equals function, and let's return, actually let's create a variable. We'll call it age, or we'll call it years. So we'll say years. Let's do new date, so it'll give us today's date if we leave the parameters blank, but I want to get the full year. So it'll give us a 4-digit year of whatever the year is now, which is 2018. And then I'm just going to subtract from it this dot year. And then all I want to do, let me close this sidebar up, actually make this bigger. What I want to do after creating years is just return, and I'm going to use an object literal here, and I'm just going to say I want to use the title, so I'm going to use the syntax so I can use a variable. I'm going to say this dot title is, and then we can use that years variable, so we'll say is years, and then the text years old. And then if I were to save this and we just look at book 2 itself and look in the proto, you'll see get age. And if I want to use it, I can simply do dot get age and save. Wait a minute, not a number. Const years equals new date dot get, oh, I forgot parentheses. There we go. So book 2 is 2 years old. All right, so let's create one more prototype method, and let's create one where we actually manipulate the data. So I'm going to call this revise, and what we want to do is basically just change the year, because if it's revised or it's rewritten, then I want to add the new year. So we'll say book.prototype.revise equals a function, and this is actually going to take in a parameter of new year. Okay. And then what we want to do is just set this dot year equals to whatever the new year that's passed in. And then I'm also going to add a property to it called revise, just so we know that it's been revised. And I'm going to set that to a Boolean of true. And then what we'll do is we'll go down here, we'll console log book2, and then we'll revise it. So we'll say book2 dot revise, and we'll pass in a year. So we'll say 2018 this year, and then let's console log it again. Okay, so we'll say book2 and save. So the first one, you see the year is 2016, and then we revise it, and the second one, the year is 2018, and it also add revise true to it. Okay, so you can manipulate the data as well. All right, so I think that's as far as I want to go with just creating different prototype methods. I know that these are kind of weird examples, but I wanted to do something that's simple and understandable. So now we're going to take a look at inheritance, okay, with prototypes. So let's go to inheritance. Let's actually copy the constructor and the get summary. We don't need all the different methods. So we'll paste that in. And then what I want to do is I want to be able to create a magazine object, but I want this magazine to inherit the properties of the book. Okay, so let's do, let's see, what do we want to do here? Let's say function magazine. So this is basically going to be the magazine constructor. So function magazine, and this is going to take in, we want to do the same as book, so title, author, year, but we also want month. Okay, and let me just close this sidebar up. Now in here, what we can do is we can take the book object and we can say .call, and then what this will take in is the magazine itself, or the instance itself, so this, and then the fields, so title, author, year. Okay, now we also want a month, so for that we actually have to specify this dot month equals month, like that. And then we should be able to create a magazine, so we'll say, let's say instantiate magazine object. So we'll say mag1 equals new magazine, and we'll pass in, we'll call it mag1, author, we'll say John Doe, year, we'll say 2018, and then month, we'll say Jan. All right, and then if we were to console.log mag1 and save, I need to change the file again, keep forgetting. So this is for_inheritance. I can close these other ones up. And you can see we get our magazine, which has the title, the author, the month, and the year. Now, let's say we want to call get summary from our magazine. Let's see what happens. We get a type error that says get summary is not a function. So in order to inherit the prototype methods of book, we need to add another line here. And this is a lot easier with classes, by the way. So let's say inherit prototype. So we can say magazine dot prototype equals, and then we want to use Object.create. Okay, and we're going to talk more about this in the next file as well. So we're going to say Object.create, and then we want to say book.prototype. So now if I save, it still doesn't work. Let's see, magazine. Oh, it's because I put this below the actual instantiation. Should go right here and save, and now it works. Okay, so mag1 was written by John Doe in 2018, and no matter how many prototype methods we create, we'll be able to use that with magazine. Now, if we look at mag1, there's one other thing I want to show you, and we look at the proto object here, and we look at the constructor, you'll see that it's still using the book constructor, which has title, author, year. If we want to change this to the magazine, let's say use magazine constructor, then we can say magazine dot prototype dot constructor, and we can just set that equal to magazine and save. And now if we take a look, you'll see that now the constructor is magazine, and it uses title, author, year, and month. Okay, so that's basic prototype inheritance. So now I want to look at a different way to create objects, and that's Object.create. And before I forget, I'm going to just rename this file to 5 underscore Object.create. And I know I'm going kind of fast, guys, but this is a crash course, so I'm trying to just cram as much information as I can while still trying to explain it well, or semi-well, hopefully. So for Object.create, we want to first create an object of our prototype, so the methods that we want to use. Okay, and there's so many ways to do this type of stuff. You have all types of design patterns you can use, factory pattern and all that. But we're trying to keep this pretty basic. So we'll say object of protos, and I'm just going to call this book protos. And let's use get summary, and we can just set this to a function. Oh, geez, I can't spell. So function, and then I'll just grab from any of these. We're basically doing the same thing in all of these, just in a different way. So let's put that in. Let's also do get age, which will be a function. And we'll get that here. So take that. And notice the actual logic using this dot, it's all the same. So now we have our prototypes, and now what we can do is let's create the object, and there's a couple ways we can do it. So let's do book1 equals Object.create, and then we want to pass in the prototypes, so book protos. And then one way to do this to add properties is we could do book1.title equals book1. And let's do, what is this going to be? This is author. And then we have what? Year. So we'll do 2013, and now we can console.log, and we can say book1, and take a look, and there we go. And if we look at our protos, we have get age and get summary. Okay, so you can see it's doing the same thing, all these different ways that we're doing this. And another way, another syntax, if you don't want to do like book1 title, book1.author, we could do this a little differently. So I'm gonna just grab this first line, and instead of doing it separately, we could just add in another parameter of an object, and we could put each property, so we could say title, but we have to set an object with a value key and then whatever the value, so book1 comma here, and this will be what I keep forgetting, author. And this will be year. Okay, so if I save that, we get the same exact thing. Okay, I rarely use like this type of thing here, but you know, it's just I'm just trying to show you guys different ways to do things. So that's Object.create. Now I think that we're going to be done with ES5 prototypes and stuff like this, and let's move on to ES6 classes, which makes things a lot easier. But remember, it's going to be doing the same type of stuff underneath, and I'll show you that. So let's close that up. Let's go to index.html and change this to 6 underscore, let's do 6 underscore classes JS. Okay, and here we're going to create a class. And if you have any experience with other object-oriented languages, this should be very familiar. So we're going to say class book, and we want to do constructor. And you can use classes now without having to use Babel or anything like that. I think it's just IE that there's trouble with, but I don't know. When I develop, I don't care about IE. No one uses it anymore. So for our constructor, we're going to do title, but you can, if you want, you can still, you know, use Babel to compile, even if you're just using classes. So let's do title, author, and year. And then this is going to be no different than our constructor function that we did in, you know, back in the second file. So this dot title equals title. Year. Okay, so that's our constructor. So now we can instantiate an object. The same exact way. So const book1 equals new book. That's the name of the class. Book1. Okay. So now if we go down here in console.log book1 and save, there we go. Okay. Now, if we want to add a method to our class, let's do that. Let's add get summary. Okay, so we can simply say get summary, no dot prototype or anything like that. And I'm just going to grab the functionality, which is just this return, and put it in here. And now if I save that, I can go down here and let's actually look at book 1. And we have our author, title, year, and let's look in proto. There it is, get summary. We also have our constructor in here, and which shows that we're using the class of book, but we also have the prototype method get summary. So you can see that under the hood, it's doing the same thing. It's just basically syntactic sugar. It's an easier way to write it. So let's add some of our other ones here, like get age. And I'll grab that from the prototype. And then we'll also do revise, which takes in a parameter of new year. We'll grab that. Same functionality, no different. And now if we look at our proto, you'll see that we have all of those methods in there. And if we wanted to revise book 1, we could say book1 dot revise, and let's say 2018 book 1 and save, and you can see 2013, then we get 2018 revised true. So same exact functionality, just a different way to do it. Now we also have something called static methods, where you can actually have a method in your class that you can use without instantiating an object like this. Now if you're using something that's specific to that instance, like for instance the title, author, year, then you wouldn't use a static method. But let's say we want to create one, so we use the keyword static, and let's have one called top bookstore. This is kind of stupid, but it's just to show you how to do this. And then we're just going to return a string of Barnes and Noble. All right, so that's all that does. But it's static, meaning we don't have to instantiate it. In fact, if we were to, let me just comment this out. If we were to do book1 dot top bookstore and try to run that, it's going to say it's not a function. What we need to do is run this function on the actual class. So that class would be book. Save that, and oh, I returned it, so we actually have to console log it. And save, and we get Barnes & Noble. Okay. So I think that's pretty much the fundamentals of creating a class with properties and methods and stuff. So now let's look at subclasses. So I'm going to just copy all this and go to subclasses, and let's get rid of all that, and then we'll just keep, let's see, we'll just keep get summary. I only need one method to work with here. Now, let's say we want to have a subclass called magazine, which will have everything a book has, but also have a month. So we would do, let's put a comment here, let's say magazine subclass. And for you React developers, this will look very, very familiar. So we'll say magazine extends book. Okay, oops, I didn't mean to put parentheses there. So class magazine extends book, we want to put a constructor, and the fields that we want, which are title, author, year, and month. Now, in order to call the parent constructor, we want to use a function called super. And again, if you've worked with React, then you've most likely used the super before. And we just want to pass in the original book parameters, so title, author, year. And then in addition to that, we want to add a month, which will be set to the month that's passed in. All right, so we can go down here now. And let's say const mag1 new magazine. Close this sidebar. Let's do 2018 and month Jan. All right, and then we'll just console log mag1, save. Whoops, I forgot to change the file again. So this should be 7 underscore subclasses, and save. And there we go. So now we're seeing our magazine. Okay. Now let's say we want to use the get summary method here. So if I were to do mag1.get summary and save, it works. Mag1 was written by John Doe in 2018. So even, using subclasses is a lot easier than using inheritance with ES5. We didn't have to add those extra prototype lines and stuff like that. So it does make it easier, but I also think it's important to kind of understand what goes on underneath. And it can be really overwhelming because there's a lot of different ways to do things. A lot of times you'll be using a framework, which makes it nice because it kind of makes the rules for you and you just follow those standards. But when you're doing it with vanilla JavaScript, it's hard to decide a design pattern or, how you're going to create your objects. Are you going to use classes? Are you not? What I would suggest is taking a project that you're going to create, think of the project first, and then look at code bases that are of a similar type of project. That's what I find the most useful. I find tutorials and courses and stuff good for the syntax, but if you want to look at structure as a whole in design patterns and stuff, look at GitHub, look at other projects similar to what you're doing. Also ask questions, and ask the right people. Ask developers that are helpful, that will give you logical examples of why to use one way over another, rather than asking arrogant pricks, which there are a ton of, that just want to seem smart, and they'll give you the most complicated way they can think of just so they feel higher than you, and I can't stand those kind of people. I can't be around those types of people. You know, so make sure that you ask the right people, and that goes for online as well as in the workplace or wherever. All right, so that's going to be it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this little crash course, and I will see you in the next video. Hey guys, if you've been watching my videos for a while and you really like what I do and I've helped you out a lot, consider becoming a patron. Even for $1 per month, it pushes me to keep bringing you guys the best content I possibly can. There's reward tiers for discounts, free Udemy courses, personal support, and more. So check out the Patreon link in the description below for more info.